I'm a 26-year-old native of a small town in Ohio who now resides in the warm city of San Diego. Up until the point where I was in dire need of a new roommate, life was going well. I came across a girl named Jane, a 23-year-old from Florida who was also new to the city, while scrolling through countless Craigslist ads. I made the decision to take a chance because I believed that her eccentric personality could add some excitement to my life. I had no idea that this choice would send me into a never-ending nightmare. Jane came over to our apartment, and I could tell she was strange. She was able to completely disregard personal boundaries in a way that was uncanny. She would indiscriminately rummage through my refrigerator and devour my food without so much as a request. Even worse, she thought it was totally acceptable to use my laptop in my room when I wasn't there, frequently spending hours on plentyoffish.com without regard for my privacy. And if that wasn't annoying enough, she had a habit of unexpectedly entering my room and yelling the silliest things at the most inconvenient times. The first week alone saw just that. Jane's odd behavior only got stranger as time went on. She started hanging out with some dubious characters she had met while working at Subway. This group also included the boyfriend who had just been released from prison and his 4 friends. They weren't actually interested in Jane. They were just amused by her naivete and the fact that she would make purchases for them. Her eccentric behavior was only made worse by their presence because she was constantly looking for their approval and attention. I found Jane's propensity to leave the window slightly ajar to be one of her habits that bothered me the most. She explained that she kept losing her keys. Little did I know that this reckless habit would bring about an even more distressing turn of events, leaving me feeling unsafe in my own home. I came home one fateful day to find my apartment in ruins. My TV, laptop, roommate's smaller TV, the wedding dress I was entrusted to sell on eBay by my aunt, a stack of DVDs, even my prescription glasses were all gone. I called Jane, who had just returned home herself, as soon as panic started to set in. But rather than showing concern or support, she accused me of stealing her damaged laptop and immediately called the police on me. The situation deteriorated when the police showed up, as if the theft and false accusation weren't already enough. With increasing frustration, I found myself attempting to describe the experience. Even after her so-called friends had obviously profited from her forgetfulness regarding the unlocked window. It was shocking to see how Jane had managed to manipulate the situation. But to my surprise, the police quickly saw through her pretense. They warned me against looking for roommates on Craigslist in the future because they recognized her instability. They made notes about the items that had been taken. Then they let me handle the fallout. I confronted Jane, driven by rage and a sense of betrayal. I screamed at her for the chaos she had caused in my life while pointing my finger at her face in a fit of rage. Exactly as my rant reached its zenith, to my horror, the police re-entered. I was worried that things had gotten even worse. Luckily, the police had already figured it out. They shared my annoyance and were aware of the manipulation taking place. They made additional notes on their report and then left me on my own after a brief conversation with Jane. I devised an improvised scheme in a desperate attempt to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I lied to the burglars by making up a tale about inconspicuous cameras in the apartment. If they didn't give back my stolen property, I threatened to hand over the video to the police. My bluff, amazingly, worked. I was able to reclaim my belongings without further assistance from the police because of my sheer willpower. Although it was a scary experience, it also taught me a valuable lesson. Looking for roommates shouldn't always be done on Craigslist. I immediately took Jane's key, packed everything she owned into a single box, and left it outside the apartment. I vowed to be more watchful in the future, to never ignore the warning signs, and to put my safety first. Therefore, exercise caution if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, and using Craigslist to find a roommate. Not everyone is what they seem to be, and occasionally, the real horrors are concealed by a trustworthy online advertisement and waiting just around the corner. Story 2. Craigslist's TV. I'm a small-town guy in my 30s, and let me tell you, I've had more than my fair share of spooky experiences on Craigslist. I once tried to sell a used TV on the website. It wasn't anything fancy, just a decent entertainment center, but I figured someone might want it. I had no idea that this would develop into a terrifying event that still makes me shiver. I got a message from a woman who seemed enthusiastic about the entertainment hub. After a few texts back and forth, we scheduled a time for her to visit and look around. I believed the strategy to be fairly straightforward. We decided on a time of 7 o'clock, and I made sure everything was set up for her arrival. I eagerly awaited her arrival as 7 o'clock approached. She was nowhere to be found as the minutes passed. I was perplexed and made the decision to text her to see if she planned to come. After waiting for hours, I finally heard back right before I was about to give up. She sincerely apologized and inquired as to whether it was still possible to drop by. I typically stay up late, so even though it was already 10 p.m., I reasoned, why not? I'll give it a shot. As you can imagine, the 10 minutes she said she would take to get there turned into 20. I began to question whether I was wasting my time when another text message arrived. My curiosity overcame me, even though she said she was just pulling up. A mixture of anticipation and caution filled me as I made my way to the front door. My heart skipped a beat as I approached the door. Not only was the woman there in my driveway, but her car also had 4 or 5 additional occupants. My thoughts were racing as I tried to make sense of everything. Something wasn't right about her bringing an entourage to check out a TV. I fought the urge to ask what was going on while feeling a knot in my stomach. They all expressed a desire to see the entertainment center, the woman explained in a casual manner. I don't know about you, but having a bunch of strangers break into my house wasn't in the plan. I firmly informed her that only she could enter to check out the TV. I wasn't even sure I wanted her to enter my home at that point. I resisted her requests for at least one other person's opinion, despite her insistence. She might understand, so I told her no. I was surprised to see the woman lose her composure and become angry at my choice. She had the gall to accuse me of not living up to my Christian obligations. Let me tell you, putting myself in danger wasn't part of being a good Christian, as you might imagine. I locked all the doors because I was uneasy and went inside my house for protection. With my heart racing, I couldn't help but glance out the window. One of the guys who was with her made the odd decision to relieve himself at the end of my driveway, which made things even more bizarre. It looked like a scene from a horror film throughout. They eventually got back in the car, and with a screech of tires, they all drove off into the night. I couldn't believe it. It was like a nightmare had abruptly ended. When I considered what might have occurred if I had allowed them inside, I couldn't help but shudder. I learned a valuable lesson about using Craigslist to transact with strangers after that terrifying incident. I made sure to exercise extra caution and follow my gut instincts going forward. Simply put, you can never be sure who is lurking in the online world's shadows on the other side of that screen. Therefore, keep my story in mind if you ever find yourself selling something on Craigslist. Be wary, establish boundaries, and resist pressure to jeopardize your safety. After all, it's preferable to be branded a bad Christian than to experience a real-life horror story. Story 3. Craigslist's Car Nightmare. I'm a guy, 27, who just moved from a small town to the big city. I decided to sell my car because I felt like I would no longer need it after adjusting to life in the urban jungle. It was a reliable Honda Accord that had seen me through a lot of good times. It was 6 years old. In an effort to sell my car, I posted a listing on Craigslist one day. Soon enough, a man named Mark, who appeared to be normal and well-dressed, contacted me. He claimed to be in his early 40s and that he was purchasing the car for his college-bound daughter. We had a few phone conversations and everything seemed to be in order. I had some cautious hope when Mark showed up for the test drive. He came off as approachable and genuinely curious about the car. He carefully examined every crevice as we drove around in it together. We haggled back and forth on the price until we came to an agreement. He promised that he wouldn't let anyone else steal the car and asked for a 2-day hold on it while he made the necessary arrangements. 2 days later, in broad daylight, we reconnected in a familiar neighborhood. I felt at ease around Mark because he appeared to be as friendly as before. The crucial moment arrived after we gave the car one last test drive. He gave me a cashier's check from Chase Bank, a reputable financial institution. When I asked him to go with me to the bank with the check to cash and the title to transfer, I thought everything was going according to plan. Suddenly, Mark's actions changed from that point forward. He became hesitant and obviously nervous. As we talked about the bank visit, we parked by the side of my street. I made an effort to convince myself that if he had intended to steal my car, he would already have done so. I consequently let down a little bit of my guard. Although I was adamant about finishing the transaction at a bank, Mark requested one more inspection before heading to the bank, and I reluctantly complied. Mark suddenly jumped back into the driver's seat and slammed on the gas as we both got out of the car to give it another look. Before I could react, he sped off, leaving the passenger door wide open as the car jerked forward. My veins filled with panic as I made fruitless attempts to follow him. I turned to the onlookers, hysterically pleading for someone to call 911 after realizing I couldn't outrun a car. While I told the tale to the dispatcher on their phone, a good Samaritan called emergency services. 5 feet away, a covert police car with 2 officers on it pulled out of an alley. I frantically waved them down as I described my harrowing experience. I obeyed the officer's orders to get in the back of their car without thinking. My heart begged them to act quickly and apprehend the criminal who was driving my beloved car, in the hope that it would help them locate my stolen car. I gave them every piece of information I could recall, including the make, model, and license plate. The officers reassured me that they wouldn't start a fast chase while I was in the car, but they immediately called in support from nearby units. Unfortunately, the offender got away, and the officers dropped me off at the police station to make a report. As I processed my insurance claim, I became frustrated and angry with myself because I was concerned about being accused of fraud. After a grueling 3 months, the police called with unexpected news that my car had been found 3 states away, just as I was about to receive compensation. As it turned out, Mark had been working on a scheme with his accomplice, Prickface. In order to avoid being identified, Mark stole my car and gave it to Prickface for a quick sale. However, Prickface was able to sell it to a regular Joe who genuinely thought he was getting a car for his daughter who was going to college. But when Joe attempted to register the car, it was reported as stolen, which set off a series of unfortunate events. Joe, Prickface, and I were scheduled to meet at the station by the police. Prickface, who was anxious to stay out of trouble, agreed to return the money Joe had paid him, even though he denied having any connection to Mark. In an unexpected turn, we decided that Joe's daughter could keep the car, and I would accept Prickface's refund. I did receive compensation for my car in the end, but the entire ordeal left me feeling stressed and demoralized. I continued to buy and sell cars on Craigslist despite the ordeal. Evidently, I didn't learn my lesson, even though I now make sure to take a photo of the applicant's driver's license at the outset of every meeting.